Remember, we're probing a couple of hundred years, so here's a second level. Maybe there was bedrock underneath this level, and perhaps that's what that protrusion back there is bedrock. But you can imagine that things might have hung on the walls. Things would have been stuck in that alcove, since they could be. Over here would have been tables of some sort, or buckets and amorphi or whatever for holding things. And people would have walked up here to get up to that level to see what was there, and perhaps on those protrusions they were squared off nicely and worked as display tables. Here again you can see this bit of protrusion, so it had some ubiquitous benefit and service for these places. Here are the stairs on the other side for some reason. And notice that this, on here we've shifted too. That that little table pile of rocks or whatever it was is now on the right side. Stairway on the left. And these last two archways, unlike this one, is enclosed, or has been enclosed, with what looks like it could be a second level. Maybe not. We'll go inside and see if we can get by the spiders. Well, there we are. Same kind of design. That shelf is much higher than the others, just reflecting perhaps the topography of the underlying bedrock. But why enclosed? Maybe it was a bank or held more important stuff. And I'm guessing, as is the case with ruins, that the grade that I'm standing on, this walkway, is higher by a foot or two or three than the original, since that's a very short entryway. Even shorter, my theory may be breaking down. That does not look to be an entryway, but what function did it serve, that narrow slot in there? I noticed something that might account for that slot. Listen, there's water in there. Perhaps this was part of the cistern system. And the slot down below us was a way that water was allowed to funnel out here somehow. And yet no water next to it. Go figure. Now I'm standing underneath an archway, which I think may be a tower to my left, right where the tip of my, or the top of my thumb is there. That what looks like a building with a shadow to the left. And where number 10 is the prison. So this should have been the prison. And whether it included this area across the walkway or not, I don't know. So what I'm looking for is two things. One, that the notes say that the prison floor had very sharp, pointy rocks because it was meant to be uncomfortable for the Albanian prisoners here, because they wanted them to change from Christianity to Muslim. Also, there's the individual cells are supposed to have a trench-like at the bottom of them, so that the guards could throw cold water down on them in the wintertime and make their lives even worse, because they had to sleep, squat, walk, and stand in that cold, freezing water. So I'll go back down here again in the hopes that this is the prison and we can see some evidence of it. The only thing I see down here is this narrow entrance, not for the squeamish, but we'll go and see if I can see anything in here without getting attacked by something. Nope. You can see as much as I can. There's 2 or 3 levels there. It doesn't seem to indicate what they're talking about. It's an uneven floor, but not particularly sharpy, pointy. Who knows what's over in there? My flashlight's not good enough to tell. I'll back out. Okay, I'm standing in what also is part of the prison area, supposedly in the map, and looking across that walkway that goes from east to west are a very nice preserved arch formations. So let's go take a look at those at least, see what we can see. And we can see that these arches were much deeper. They've been filled in for whatever the reason. You can see that line where it's been filled in. So these would have been pretty arcades, much deeper than what we're seeing now, much taller, if you will. So we'll go inside here and see what we can see, and then come back out and get up more on top. Okay, I'm standing inside this group of arched galleries, if you will, and I'll just pan around a bit and reflect on it. You see these arches here, the smaller ones to my right, pretty easy to see how they're designed. Pretty well cut stone, predictable dimensions. You can even see what I think is the keystone right there. But then what about the main arches themselves, the vaults? They seem to be made of varying dimension, jumbled rock. And yet, how did they build these things? The same issue Brunelleschi had with his dome in Florence. How did they get the support in order to get the final completed form of the arched vault so that it would not then collapse? How did they progress to the finished point without it collapsing in advance, is my point. Nice interplay of arched walls. You can see that that wall with an arch there was built after this wall to my left in time. Very nice corners. Good work, you would think. And notice the elements of design. The double, reasonably flat stone layers filled in with the more jumbled rock. But where I'm walking, it all been filled in, and you can see that there was some stone paving, if you will, and yet there's the earlier level down below. So just different uses, but significant investment for what purpose? In reducing volume. Here's pretty. Ah, I see what it is, a stairway up. Notice progressively larger half arches and full arches. And they're pretty popping out of that wall. So we'll go up these stairs and walk this wall. The cement's relatively new, so it's probably been restored. You can see how this entire complex would have extended much higher than I'm standing at. Here we're looking down into what would have been a large building, I would guess, supported by those large pillars and buildings all along that terrace, if you will. And as we can see, the remnants here of some prior structures. And here we're looking down theoretically on the prison, but not at all what the earlier guidebook at the hostel implied we'd find. So maybe missing something. This is interesting only because it seems to suggest that underneath us are 1, 2, 3, and 4 vaulted areas above what was once a room. And there was its floor level, so it would have been filled in up to that level, and then a flooring of perhaps slate, which may represent what this is, or it may be, these stones may be the remains of a roof. And I'm guessing that the pretty arched stairway went right up in the middle interior of a building, of that large space. I realized our lines of stones were just for seating purposes for the amphitheater. Not sure what this little building is for, but the last word there seems to suggest that liberal Muslim sect, the Bektashi or something like that. On the other hand, tourism is exactly what Albania needs, the Balkans needs. Lots and lots of tourism, both for the income and the exposure to generate even more. Looking through this narrow portal, but notice how wide is the actual opening on the exterior side, giving us a really large field of fire for what I would guess would be a cannon mounted somewhere about right in here where the camera is right now, so it could pivot like this. And here another view we haven't quite had, both a foreshortened view as well as a long distance view. It's a very pretty area. Not spectacular like our mountains or Switzerland's mountains, but very pretty because of the mountains and the layers, if you will, of mountains in the background.